Don't cry, sir. You can borrow my mom. Maid's daughter leaves Billionaire speechless on Christmas Eve. The grandfather clock in the marble hallway struck midnight, its chimes echoing through the vast emptiness of the Whitmore estate. Alexander Whitmore stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his study, a glass of untouched scotch in his hand, watching the first snowflakes of Christmas Eve drift past the lamplight outside. At 35, he had everything the world measured as success: a tech empire worth billions, properties across 3 continents, cars that cost more than most people's homes, and absolutely nothing that mattered. The reflection staring back at him from the dark window was a stranger. Hollow eyes, expensive suit hanging on a frame that had grown thinner over the past 6 months, a face that had forgotten how to smile. His phone sat silent on the mahogany desk behind him. No messages. No calls. Not even the perfunctory holiday greetings from business associates seemed to come anymore. They had all attended Evelyn's funeral, of course, with their somber faces and rehearsed condolences. But grief had a shelf life in their world, and his had apparently expired. Evelyn. Even thinking her name felt like swallowing glass. His wife of 7 years, taken by a sudden aneurysm on a June morning that had started like any other. She had been drinking her coffee, laughing at something on her phone, planning their anniversary trip to Tuscany. And then she was gone. Just like that. The randomness of it haunted him more than anything else. No warning, no goodbye, no chance to say all the things he'd assumed they'd have decades to express. The months that followed were a blur of legal matters, business obligations conducted on autopilot, and nights that stretched endlessly despite the sleeping pills his doctor prescribed. His parents had passed years ago. Evelyn had been an only child, her parents already gone before they'd married. The friends they'd had, the friends Evelyn had cultivated, because Alexander had always been too busy for such things, had drifted away, uncomfortable with his grief, unsure what to say to a man who had everything except what he needed most. He had let the staff go, one by one. The groundskeeper, the driver, the cook, the housekeepers. What did he need them for? The house felt wrong with people in it, their presence somehow emphasizing Evelyn's absence rather than filling it. Let the place fall into disrepair, he thought bitterly. Let the dust gather, and the gardens grow wild. What did any of it matter? But one person had refused to leave. Maria Santos, the maid who had worked for them for 3 years, had simply continued to show up every morning at 7 o'clock sharp.
He'd told her she was dismissed.
She'd nodded politely and returned the next day. He'd told her he couldn't bear to have anyone in the house. She'd asked where else she was supposed to go with a 3-year-old daughter and no family in the city. He'd written her a check for 6 months' salary and told her to find somewhere else. She'd left the check on the kitchen counter and shown up the next morning anyway. Eventually, he'd given up trying to make her leave. She was quiet, at least. Kept to herself. He rarely saw her, even though he knew she cleaned the rooms he didn't use, prepared simple meals he barely touched, left them covered on the kitchen island for him to discover at odd hours. It was an arrangement of mutual ghosts, her moving through the house like a whisper, him haunting his own life. Tonight, though, the silence was different. Heavier. It was Christmas Eve, and the contrast between what should be and what was felt sharp enough to draw blood. Last Christmas, Evelyn had insisted on decorating every inch of the house. She'd played carols at eardrum-shattering volume, forced him to help her string lights that inevitably tangled, laughed when he'd cursed at the tree stand that refused to hold the Douglas fir straight. They'd hosted a party for 40 people, and she'd worn a ridiculous red dress with jingle bells sewn into the hem that rang every time she moved. This year, there wasn't a single decoration. No tree, no lights, no wreaths. Just emptiness and expensive furniture and the ghost of joy that once lived here. Alexander drained the scotch in one bitter swallow, welcoming the burn. Maybe he should have gone to the office. At least there, the emptiness felt appropriate. A corporate building was supposed to be hollow. But Evelyn's voice echoed in his memory. You work too much, Alex. Life is happening while you're staring at spreadsheets. How right she'd been. And how little time he'd realized they had. He was reaching for the bottle to pour another glass when he heard it, a sound so unexpected in the tomb-like silence that he thought he'd imagined it. A child's laughter, bright and clear, coming from somewhere downstairs.
For a moment, his heart seized.
Then reality crashed back. Maria's daughter. He'd forgotten she sometimes brought the child when she couldn't find care, though they'd always kept to the servants' quarters in the East Wing where he never went. The laughter came again, followed by a woman's gentle shushing and the little girl's voice, impossibly cheerful. "But Mama, it's Christmas. Santa might come even here." Something in Alexander's chest cracked. The pure, unguarded hope in that small voice felt like an accusation. Here he was, drowning in self-pity, while somewhere in his own house, a child who probably had nothing still believed in magic. He set down the glass and walked to his desk, intending to bury himself in work, to drown out the sounds of life happening in his mausoleum. But his hand trembled as he reached for his laptop, and suddenly, shockingly, he felt tears burning in his eyes. Not the numb grief that had become his constant companion, but something sharp and immediate and unbearable. Alexander Whitmore, who hadn't cried since the funeral, who prided himself on control even as his life crumbled around him, pressed his palms against the mahogany desk and let out a sound that was part sob, part animal howl of pain. The Scotch glass fell to the floor, shattering into 1,000 glittering pieces, much like everything else he'd ever loved. Maria Santos heard the crash from the kitchen and froze, her hands deep in soapy water where she'd been washing the few dishes Mr. Whitmore had actually used. Her heart hammered against her ribs. In 3 years of working for the Whitmores, she'd learned to read the household's emotional temperature. Before Mrs. Evelyn's death, it had been warm, sometimes loud with laughter, full of life. After, it had been like working in a museum, everything beautiful and cold and untouchable. But tonight felt different. Dangerous, even. She'd seen the way Mr. Whitmore had been moving through the house these past weeks, like a man walking toward an edge only he could see. She'd noticed the weight loss, the dark circles, the way his hands shook sometimes when he thought no one was looking. She recognized the signs. After her divorce from Raphael, after he'd left her with nothing but a black eye and empty promises, she'd stood at that same edge herself. The only thing that had pulled her back was the tiny heartbeat she discovered growing inside her. Sophia. Her miracle. Her reason for everything. Mama? Sophia's voice broke through her thoughts. Her daughter sat at the small kitchen table, surrounded by construction paper and crayons, creating what she insisted was a Christmas card for Santa. At 3 years old, Sophia lived in a world where magic was real and every problem had a solution. Maria envied her that innocence, even as she would die to protect it. "Stay here, Mija," Maria said softly, drying her hands. "Mama needs to check on something." She found the source of the crash quickly enough. Mr. Whitmore's study was just off the main hallway. The door stood open, light spilling out, and she could see broken glass scattered across the oriental rug. But it was the sound that made her blood run cold. A man crying. Not quiet tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to tear themselves from somewhere primal. Every instinct told her to turn around, to respect his privacy, to not intrude on grief this raw. But Maria had been raised by a mother who believed that turning away from someone's pain was a sin greater than witnessing it uninvited. She stepped into the doorway, her worn sneakers making no sound on the thick carpet. Alexander Whitmore was slumped over his desk, shoulders shaking, one hand covering his face. He looked nothing like the composed billionaire who barely acknowledged her presence each morning. He looked, Maria thought with a pang, like a boy who'd lost his way home. "Mr. Whitmore?" she said softly. He jerked upright, swiping roughly at his face, his expression cycling through shock, embarrassment, and something close to anger. "I'm fine. Just leave me alone. Please." The please stopped her from backing away. It was the first time in months she'd heard him ask rather than command. "The glass," she said, gesturing to the mess. "Let me clean it up before you cut yourself." "I'll do it. Just go." "With respect, sir, you're not wearing shoes." She moved past him to the closet where she kept cleaning supplies, very aware of his eyes tracking her movements. "And you've been drinking." It's one glass. I'm not drunk. No, she agreed, kneeling to carefully pick up the larger shards. But you're hurting. That's more dangerous than any amount of alcohol. She felt rather than saw him stiffen. For a long moment, the only sound was glass clinking as she collected the pieces. Then, quietly, "You don't know what you're talking about." Maria sat back on her heels, meeting his red-rimmed eyes directly. 3 years ago, she never would have had this courage. But grief and survival had burned away a lot of her fear. My ex-husband, Raphael, he broke a lot of glasses in our apartment. Usually during fights, sometimes just because he was angry at the world. After he left, I broke one myself. On purpose. Threw it at the wall just to hear it shatter. She smiled sadly. It didn't help. It never does. Something shifted in Mr. Whitmore's expression, not softening exactly, but recognition. The look of one survivor seeing another. Before either of them could speak again, a small voice piped up from the hallway. "Mama, I finished Santa's card. Can we?" "Oh." Sophia stood in the doorway in her pink pajamas decorated with purple butterflies, her dark curls escaping from a lopsided ponytail, clutching a crayon-covered piece of construction paper. Her enormous brown eyes went wide as she took in the scene, her mother kneeling on the floor, the tall man behind the desk with tears still wet on his cheeks, the glittering glass scattered everywhere. "Sophia, go back to the kitchen, baby," Maria said quickly. This isn't. But Sophia, with the fearlessness unique to 3-year-olds who'd never learned that the world might hurt them, was already padding into the room in her bare feet. "Are you sad?" she asked Mr. Whitmore directly. "Sophia." Maria started to rise, but Mr. Whitmore held up a hand. "It's okay." His voice was rough but not unkind. He looked down at the tiny girl with an expression Maria couldn't quite read. "Yes," he said simply. "I'm very sad." Sophia considered this, her head tilting to one side. "Why?" "Sophia, that's not," Maria began, but again Mr. Whitmore interrupted. "Someone I loved very much had to go away," he said. "And I miss her." "Did she die?" Sophia asked with the bluntness only children could manage. "Yes." Sophia nodded sagely, as if this made perfect sense. Then she held out her construction paper. "I made this for Santa, but you can have it if it makes you feel better. It's a picture of me and Mama. See? That's us holding hands. And that's a rainbow, because rainbows are happy." Maria felt her throat tighten as Mr. Whitmore took the paper with shaking hands. The drawing was typical 3-year-old art, stick figures with enormous heads and sunshine that took up half the sky. But he studied it as if it were priceless. "Thank you," he whispered. "It's beautiful." "You're welcome," Sophia beamed. Then, apparently deciding they were now friends, she walked right up to him and patted his knee consolingly. "Don't cry, sir. It's okay to be sad, but it's also okay to be happy sometimes. Mama says we can be both at the same time, like eating ice cream when you have a scraped knee." Despite everything, a sound that might have been a laugh escaped Mr. Whitmore. "That's very wise." "I know," Sophia said matter-of-factly. Then, after a moment's consideration, she added, "You can borrow my mama if it helps. She gives really good hugs. They make everything better." The silence that followed was absolute. Maria felt heat flooding her face, mortification warring with the urge to sweep Sophia up and run from the room. But when she dared to look at Mr. Whitmore, he wasn't angry or disgusted. He was staring at Sophia with an expression of such naked longing and surprise that Maria had to look away from the intimacy of it. "That's very generous," he managed. "But I couldn't." "It's okay," Sophia assured him. "Mama has enough hugs for everyone. She told me so. And love gets bigger when you share it, like pizza, when you cut it into pieces. Everyone gets some, but there's still a whole pizza." Sophia's theology might need some work, but her heart is in the right place, Maria said softly, finally finding her voice. She stood, moving toward her daughter. "Come on, Mija. Let's let Mr. Whitmore rest." But Sophia had already climbed onto the leather chair next to his desk, swinging her legs happily. It's Christmas Eve, she announced. You shouldn't be alone on Christmas Eve. That's sad. You should be with people who love you. Sophia, Maria started, but Mr. Whitmore spoke first. What if there aren't any people who love you? The question was barely audible, spoken to himself more than to them. But Sophia heard it and looked at him with the infinite confidence of childhood. That's silly, she said. Everyone has people who love them. You just have to look.
See?
My mama loves me and I love her and now we love you too. Easy. Maria watched emotions war across Mr. Whitmore's face. Disbelief, hope, pain. Something that might have been hunger. His hand was still clutching Sophia's, drawing like a lifeline. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. Just like that? Just like that, Sophia confirmed. Then she yawned enormously, covering her mouth with one small hand. I'm sleepy now. But don't be sad anymore, okay? Tomorrow is Christmas and Santa might come, and there will be pancakes probably. Lots of reasons to be happy. She slipped off the chair and padded over to her mother, who scooped her up automatically. Over her daughter's head, Maria met Mr. Whitmore's eyes. They stared at each other in the soft lamplight, two broken people who'd learned to survive, bearing witness to each other's carefully hidden wounds. She's right, you know, Maria said quietly. About not being alone. If you want, there's soup. I made extra. It's not fancy, but it's warm. And there's no pizza, but I could make hot chocolate. She held her breath, certain he would refuse, would retreat back into his fortress of grief. But after a long moment, Alexander Whitmore did something she hadn't seen in 6 months. He smiled. It was small, fragile, cracking at the edges. But it was real. I'd like that, he said. Very much. The kitchen felt different with 3 people in it. Maria had spent countless mornings here alone, preparing meals that went mostly uneaten, cleaning counters that stayed pristine because no one used them. Now, with Mr. Whitmore sitting awkwardly at the breakfast bar and Sophia chattering away despite her earlier declaration of sleepiness, the vast space felt almost cozy. Almost being the operative word, Maria thought as she ladled soup into bowls. The tension radiating from Mr. Whitmore was palpable. He sat with the rigid posture of someone in unfamiliar territory, his hands clasped on the marble counter, his eyes darting around as if seeing the kitchen for the first time. Which Maria realized he might actually be. In 3 years, she'd never seen him venture into this part of the house. Mrs. Evelyn had loved the kitchen, had often perched on that very stool to chat while Maria worked, but Mr. Whitmore had always been elsewhere. Office, study, one of the many rooms that comprised his world. Do you like tomato soup? Sophia asked, apparently having appointed herself host. She dragged her step stool over to the counter so she could sit at his eye level, and now regarded him with the serious attention of a diplomat conducting crucial negotiations. It's my favorite. Mama makes it with magic. Magic. Mr. Whitmore's voice was still rough from crying, but Maria heard him trying. That counted for something. The magic is called basil and oregano, Maria said dryly, setting a bowl in front of him. Very powerful herbs. Feared throughout the culinary world. Sophia giggled. Mama's funny. Sometimes she makes jokes and doesn't even smile when she says them. That's called. What's it called, Mama? Deadpan, Maria supplied, bringing over her own bowl and taking the stool on Sophia's other side. Though your daughter thinks it means I make jokes about zombies. Which would be better, Sophia said loyally. Zombies are funny, especially the ones that walk like this. She demonstrated with her arms out, making groaning sounds until Maria gently pushed her arms back down. Eat, monster, before your soup gets cold. For a few minutes, they ate in silence punctuated only by Sophia's running commentary on the soup's various qualities. This carrot is shaped like a star. This one's too hot. I have to blow on it like a dragon. Maria watched Mr. Whitmore from the corner of her eye, saw him take his first tentative spoonful, then another. He ate slowly but steadily, and she felt a small pulse of satisfaction. When was the last time he'd had a proper meal? From the gauntness of his frame. Too long. This is excellent, he said finally, and seemed surprised by his own words. Thank you. It's just soup, Maria said, but she felt warmth in her cheeks at the compliment. Nothing fancy. You've probably had better at five-star restaurants. I've had a lot of expensive food, Mr. Whitmore said quietly. Doesn't mean it was better. He paused, staring into his bowl. Evelyn loved to cook. She wasn't very good at it, but she loved the process. She'd make these elaborate Italian dinners that took hours and make me sit at the counter just like this, talking to her while she worked. She'd always burn something or add too much salt, and we'd end up ordering pizza at 9 o'clock at night because dinner was inedible. But she'd be laughing the whole time, covered in flour or tomato sauce, completely unrepentant. It was the first time Maria had heard him speak his wife's name aloud since the funeral. She held very still, afraid that any movement might break the spell, might send him retreating back into silence. She sounds wonderful, Maria said softly. She was. He took another spoonful of soup, and Maria saw his hand tremble slightly. She was chaos and light, and everything I didn't know I needed. I thought I'd built this perfect life. Successful company, impressive house, all the markers of achievement. And then she walked into a board meeting I was conducting, completely lost, looking for the marketing department, and asked me if I knew where it was. She worked for one of our contractors. I married her 6 months later. Sophia had gone quiet, sensing somehow that this was important, that the adults were sharing something that needed her silence. She swung her feet gently, her soup temporarily forgotten, watching Mr. Whitmore with those enormous eyes. I worked too much, he continued, more to himself than to them. She'd ask me to leave early, to take a vacation, to just be present for dinner without my phone. And I'd promise I would, after this project, after this quarter, after this deal. There was always something more important. Until there wasn't. Until she was gone, and all those projects and quarters and deals meant absolutely nothing. She knew you loved her, Maria said firmly. I saw you two together, remember? The way you looked at her when she wasn't watching. The way you'd smile when you heard her laugh. Love isn't just about time, though time matters. It's about presence. And you were present, even when you were distracted. She knew. How can you be sure? Because I saw her face when you came home. Every single day, no matter how late, her whole expression would light up. That's not the face of a woman who doubted she was loved. Mr. Whitmore's eyes glistened with fresh tears, but these were different somehow, cleaner, less toxic. I miss her so much. The house is so empty without her. I'm so empty without her. I don't know how to be Alexander Whitmore without Evelyn Whitmore beside me. Sophia, unable to contain herself any longer, reached across and patted his arm. It's okay to miss people. Mama says missing someone means they were worth knowing. It's a good thing, even if it hurts. When did you get so wise? Mr. Whitmore asked, managing a watery smile. Mama teaches me stuff, Sophia said proudly. She's really smart. She knows everything. Ask her anything. Sophia exaggerates, Maria said quickly. I know very little, actually. Just how to keep a 3-year-old alive and how to make soup without burning the house down. The bar is low. But Mr. Whitmore was looking at her now with a focus that made her uncomfortable. Really looking, as if seeing her for the first time as an actual person rather than a function of the household. You never talk about Sophia's father. I realize tonight I don't even know if he's in the picture. Maria stiffened. It wasn't an unreasonable question. They just shared his grief. It was only fair he might be curious about her life. But old wounds still hurt when prodded. He's not, she said carefully. He left before Sophia was born. It's just the two of us. I'm sorry. I'm not. The words came out more forcefully than she'd intended, and Sophia looked up in surprise. Maria softened her voice. I mean, I'm sorry Sophia doesn't have a father who wants to know her, because she's extraordinary, and it's his loss. But I'm not sorry he's gone. He wasn't a kind man, Mr. Whitmore. He had a different face in public than in private. Leaving was the best thing he ever did for us, even if he didn't mean it as a gift. Understanding flickered in Mr. Whitmore's eyes. He hurt you. It wasn't a question. Maria didn't answer directly, just pulled Sophia a little closer. We're safe now. That's what matters. And we're happy, aren't we, Mija? Super happy, Sophia confirmed. We have each other, and that's lots. Mama says two people who love each other is a whole family. We don't need more. But more would be nice too, Maria added, not sure why she felt compelled to say it. Someday, maybe, when the right person comes along. Family isn't just blood, it's the people who show up, who stay. She felt Mr. Whitmore's eyes on her, but didn't look up from her soup. The kitchen suddenly felt very warm. Why did you stay? He asked abruptly. After Evelyn died, I tried to fire you. Multiple times. I was horrible to be around. Most people would have taken the 6-month salary and run. Maria considered her answer carefully. At first, honestly, because I needed the job and had nowhere else to go. The money you offered was generous, but it wouldn't last forever, and finding work when you have a toddler and no family support isn't easy. So I stayed out of necessity. She paused. But then I kept staying because someone needed to. You were drowning, Mr. Whitmore. I recognized the signs. And I couldn't just walk away from that. Mrs. Evelyn was kind to me. She'd want someone to make sure you ate, that you had clean clothes, that the house didn't fall apart around you while you tried to hold yourself together. So I stayed for her. And then I stayed for you, Maria admitted quietly. Because grief shouldn't be faced alone. Because everyone deserves to have someone who notices if they're eating, if they're sleeping, if they're okay. Even if they don't want that someone there. The silence stretched between them, thick with things unsaid. Sophia had finished her soup and was beginning to droop against Maria's side, the late hour finally catching up with her. But Mr. Whitmore didn't move, didn't break eye contact, and Maria felt something shift in the air between them. Not romantic, not yet, but recognition. Connection. I don't deserve your kindness, he said finally. It's not about deserve, Maria replied. It's about need. And about being human. We're all just doing our best, Mr. Whitmore. Some days that looks like running a billion-dollar company. Other days it looks like eating soup at midnight on Christmas Eve with people who care if you're okay. Alexander, he said suddenly. What? My name. It's Alexander. I think, after everything tonight, you've earned the right to use it. If you want to. Maria felt something warm unfurl in her chest. Then you should call me Maria. Not just when you're telling me to leave. He laughed, actually laughed, a rusty sound but genuine.
Deal.
And Maria? Thank you. For staying. For the soup. For. He gestured vaguely toward Sophia, who was now fully asleep against her mother's side, snoring softly. For her. I didn't realize how much I needed to remember that good things still exist in the world. Good things exist, Maria said firmly. Even in the darkest times. Sometimes we just need someone to point them out. That's what family does, the real kind, the chosen kind. They hold on to hope for you when you've lost it. Is that what we are? Alexander asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Family? Maria looked at him. This broken billionaire who'd let them into his grief, who'd accepted a child's drawing like treasure, who'd come down from his tower of isolation to share soup in a kitchen. She thought about loneliness and connection, about the people who showed up and the families we built from whatever materials we had. I think we could be, she said. If you want that. If you're willing to try. Alexander Whitmore picked up Sophia's Christmas card from where he'd laid it carefully beside his soup bowl. He traced the crayon rainbow with one finger, and when he looked up at Maria, she saw something new in his eyes. Not the emptiness that had lived there for months, but possibility. I want to try, he said. I'm terrified of trying. But I want to. Will you teach me? Teach you what? How to be part of a family again.
How to let people in.
How to believe that life can be good even after the worst thing happens. Maria stood, carefully adjusting Sophia in her arms. The little girl mumbled something about Santa and rainbows but didn't wake. Those aren't things I can teach you, Alexander. They're things we learn together. One day, one meal, one moment at a time. But if you're willing to take that journey, we'll walk it with you. She headed toward the door, then paused and looked back. Alexander was still sitting at the counter, surrounded by empty bowls and the remnants of connection, looking less like a ghost haunting his own life and more like a man considering a return to it. "Merry Christmas, Alexander," she said softly. "Merry Christmas, Maria," he replied. "And thank you for everything, for more than you know." As she carried Sophia toward the modest room they occupied in the East Wing, Maria felt the weight of the evening settling over her. Something had changed tonight, something significant. She didn't know what it would mean, what shape it would take. But for the first time in a long time, Christmas Eve felt like the eve of something wonderful rather than just another night to survive. Behind her, in the warm light of the kitchen, a man who'd thought he'd lost everything began, tentatively, to believe he might have found something worth living for after all. Maria woke to Sophia bouncing on the bed like it was a trampoline, her daughter's face split by a grin so wide it seemed to take up her entire face. Mama, wake up. It's Christmas. Santa came. There are presents everywhere." Maria groaned and squinted at her phone. 6:30 in the morning. Of course. Children operated on some internal Christmas clock that made sleep impossible past dawn. "Mija, we talked about this. Santa doesn't come to other people's houses. He only comes to our real home, remember? This is where Mama works. But he did come. There's presents with my name and everything. Come see." Before Maria could protest, Sophia had grabbed her hand and was tugging her toward the door. Still wearing the oversized t-shirt she slept in, Maria allowed herself to be pulled down the hallway toward the main part of the house, preparing to gently explain to her daughter that any presents must be a mistake, that they'd have to give them back. Then she turned the corner into the living room and stopped dead. The transformation was impossible. When she'd carried Sophia to bed last night, this room had been as empty and pristine as a hotel lobby, expensive furniture arranged just so, original artwork on the walls, nothing personal or warm or lived in. Now, in the pale light of Christmas morning, it looked like something from a storybook. A massive Christmas tree stood in front of the window, easily 10 feet tall, decorated with lights that twinkled in the dawn. Under it, presents were stacked in carefully wrapped abundance. But it was more than just the tree. Garland was draped over the fireplace mantel, stockings hung from hooks that definitely hadn't been there yesterday, and the room smelled of pine and cinnamon and something baking.
"What?"
Maria breathed, turning in a slow circle. Surprise. She spun to find Alexander standing in the doorway to the kitchen, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, the most casual she'd ever seen him. His hair was mussed, there were shadows under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept much, but his expression was almost shy. "You did this," Maria managed. "Last night, after we went to bed. I couldn't sleep anyway," he said with a shrug that tried for casual and missed. "And I kept thinking about what Sophia said. About Christmas and being with people who love you. This house used to look like this before. Evelyn would have hated seeing it so empty on Christmas morning." He paused, then added more quietly, "I hated seeing it empty too. Mr. Witt Alexander." Maria shook her head, overwhelmed. "This is too much. You didn't have to. Look," Sophia shrieked, having discovered the presents. "This one has my name. And this one. Mama, there's so many." "Sophia, we can't accept," Maria started, but Alexander held up a hand. "Please," he said simply. "Let me do this. I haven't felt anything but grief in 6 months. Last night, for a few hours, I felt something else. I felt connected.
Human.
That's because of both of you. This is just my way of saying thank you. By buying out a toy store? The stores were closed. I had everything delivered." At her expression, he had the grace to look embarrassed. "I may have called in some favors and paid exorbitant rush fees. But money is useless if you can't use it for things that matter." Maria moved closer to the tree, noticing details she'd missed in her initial shock. The ornaments weren't random. Many were clearly child-friendly, placed at Sophia height on the lower branches. Some were handmade, crafted from paper and glitter, the kind that came from those last-minute stores that stayed open late. Mixed among the expensive glass bulbs were simple decorations that looked like Alexander had made them himself, probably while she and Sophia slept. "You made ornaments," she said wonderingly. "YouTube is very educational at 3 in the morning." He moved to stand beside her, and she could smell coffee on him, sugar, exhaustion. "I haven't decorated a tree in years. Evelyn always did it. I was always working. But it turns out I remember more than I thought. And the things I didn't remember, the internet taught me." Sophia had torn into the first present, a large box that revealed a dollhouse 3 stories tall, complete with furniture and tiny dolls. Her squeal of delight was probably audible in the next county. "Mama, Mama, look at how tiny the chairs are." "Sophia, what do you say?" Maria prompted automatically. "Thank you, Mr. Alexander, sir." Sophia launched herself at him, wrapping her small arms around his legs in a hug that clearly surprised him. He froze for a moment, then carefully, tentatively, placed one hand on her head. "You're welcome, Sophia. Merry Christmas." As Sophia returned to her treasure trove, Alexander turned to Maria. "There are presents for you, too. The ones with the silver paper." "Alexander, I can't." "You can," he said firmly.
Please.
"It's just some practical things. Nothing extravagant." The first package she opened contained the softest sweater she'd ever touched, a deep forest green that must have cost more than her monthly salary used to be. The second held boots, Real winter boots, leather and fur-lined, exactly her size. There was a watch, simple but elegant. A set of kitchen knives that made her gasp because she'd been working with dull blades for months. Books. Novels she'd mentioned loving once in passing conversation with Evelyn. Books she'd thought no one had been listening about. "How did you remember?" she asked, holding a worn copy of 100 Years of Solitude. "I mentioned this once, maybe 2 years ago." "Evelyn kept notes," Alexander said quietly. "About the staff, their preferences, things they liked. I found her notebooks last night while I was looking for decorations. She wrote that you loved Marquez, that you'd learned English partly by reading his books in translation. She meant to get you a nice edition for Christmas that year, but then—" He trailed off. "She was thoughtful like that," Maria said, her voice thick.
She saw people.
"Really saw them." "She did." Alexander stared at the tree, its lights reflecting in his eyes. "I've been thinking about that. How she moved through the world paying attention, making note of what mattered to people. And I've been thinking about how I didn't. How I went through life half-blind, focused on targets and achievements, and missed all the actual living happening around me." "You're paying attention now," Maria pointed out gently. "I'm trying to." He turned to look at her, and she was struck again by how different he seemed from the remote figure she'd worked for. Grief had stripped something away, but maybe underneath it, he was finding something more real. "Maria, I want to apologize for the way I've treated you this past 6 months. You've shown me nothing but kindness and patience, and I've been barely human in return. You deserved better. You were grieving. That's not an excuse for cruelty, or for not seeing you as a person, as someone with your own life and struggles and feelings." He ran a hand through his hair. "The truth is, I think I've been not seeing people for a lot longer than 6 months. I think I've been sleepwalking through relationships, through life, and it took losing Evelyn to wake me up. But now I am awake, and I see you, Maria. I see what you've done, what you've sacrificed, how hard you've worked while I fell apart. And I want you to know that it matters. You matter." Maria felt tears prickling at her eyes. No employer had ever spoken to her like this, as an equal, as someone whose value extended beyond the tasks they performed. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means more than you know. Can I ask you something?" At her nod, he continued. "Why didn't you leave? Really? I know you needed the job, but there are other jobs. You're skilled, hardworking, any household would be lucky to have you. So why stay in a house full of ghosts with an employer who could barely acknowledge your existence?" Maria thought about how to answer, watching Sophia arrange tiny furniture in the dollhouse, her daughter's joy so pure it hurt to witness. "Because I recognize myself in you," she said finally. After Raphael left, after I found out I was pregnant and realized I was going to have to do this alone, I was where you are now. Broken. Barely functioning. If my mother hadn't been alive then, if she hadn't forced me to eat, to sleep, to believe I could survive this, I don't know if I would have made it. She passed away just before I came to work for you and Mrs. Evelyn, right before Sophia was born. And I promised myself that if I ever saw someone drowning the way I'd been drowning, I wouldn't look away. I'd throw them a line, even if they didn't want to grab it. I didn't make it easy. Drowning people rarely do, Maria said with a slight smile. They thrash. They push away help because accepting it means admitting they can't save themselves. But eventually, if someone holds on long enough, if they refuse to let go, sometimes the drowning person realizes they want to be saved after all. Alexander was quiet for a long moment. I don't think I've wanted to be saved until last night. Until a 3-year-old told me I could borrow her mother and made me realize I wasn't alone unless I chose to be. Mama, Sophia called. Can we make pancakes? Mr. Alexander said maybe there would be pancakes. Did he now? Maria arched an eyebrow at Alexander, who had the grace to look sheepish. I might have mentioned pancakes when I was trying to convince her to go to sleep, he admitted. In my defense, I was improvising comfort strategies. I have no actual experience with children. Then you're about to get some, Maria said, starting toward the kitchen. Come on. If we promise pancakes, we're making pancakes. But you're helping. I don't know how to make pancakes. Then it's time you learned. No one gets to just watch in this family. Everyone participates. The word slipped out before she'd consciously chosen it. Family. She froze, worried she'd overstepped, that Alexander would retreat behind his walls again. But when she glanced back, he was smiling, a real smile, reaching his eyes, transforming his face into something younger, lighter. Okay, he said simply. Teach me. The kitchen quickly descended into cheerful chaos. Maria directed operations while Sophia sat on the counter supervising, and Alexander attempted to follow instructions with the intense focus he probably usually reserved for board meetings. He measured flour with scientific precision, mixed batter like he was conducting a chemistry experiment, and looked genuinely distressed when his first pancake came out lopsided. It's supposed to be round, he said, staring at the vaguely amoeba-shaped creation. It's your first pancake. It's supposed to be terrible, Maria assured him. That's pancake law. The first one is always a sacrificial offering to the breakfast gods. Is that true? He asked Sophia. Super true, Sophia confirmed solemnly. One time Mama made one that looked like a butt. We laughed so hard. Sophia. Maria tried for stern but couldn't help laughing. We don't, that's not. It did though, Sophia insisted. Remember? You said it looked like, Moving on. Maria interjected quickly, trying not to notice Alexander's shoulders shaking with suppressed laughter. Let's focus on making pancakes that don't resemble any body parts, shall we? By the time they sat down to eat, at the breakfast bar where they'd shared soup the night before, Alexander had managed 3 decent pancakes and only 2 kitchen towel casualties. Sophia had syrup in her hair, Maria had flour on her shirt, and Alexander had a splash of batter on his expensive sweater. They looked, Maria thought, like an actual family on Christmas morning, messy, imperfect, happy. This is nice, Alexander said quietly, watching Sophia drown her pancakes in enough syrup to give a dentist nightmares. I'd forgotten how nice it could be.
Just being with people.
Doing normal things. Normal things are underrated, Maria agreed. We spend so much time chasing extraordinary when ordinary is where all the good stuff lives. Evelyn used to say something similar. She'd beg me to take a day off, to just be home, to do nothing. And I always thought doing nothing was wasteful, that every minute should be productive, should count towards something measurable. He shook his head. I was an idiot. You were ambitious. There's a difference. Is there? Ambition costs something. In my case, it cost me time with someone I loved. Time I can never get back. Maria set down her fork, meeting his eyes directly. You can't change the past, Alexander. None of us can. We can only choose what we do with the present. And right now, in this moment, You're here. You're present. That counts for something. Does it count enough? It's a start, Maria said firmly. And starts are where everything good begins. You think I knew how to be a mother when Sophia was born? I was terrified. I'd never even held a baby before they handed her to me. But I started. One day at a time. One feeding, one diaper, one sleepless night. And eventually, those starts added up to something beautiful. Sophia, sticky and satisfied, leaned against Maria's side. You're the best mama in the whole world, she announced. You know everything. I know how to make pancakes and how much I love you, Maria corrected, kissing the top of her daughter's head. Everything else is just improvisation. Alexander laughed, a sound that was becoming less rusty, more natural. Then we're all improvising together. I like that. It feels less pressure than having to know what I'm doing. They spent the rest of the morning in the living room, Sophia playing with her new dollhouse while Maria and Alexander sat on the couch, drinking coffee and talking. Really talking, not the careful employer-employee conversations they'd had before, but real dialogue. He told her about his childhood, growing up with parents who loved him but never understood his drive. She told him about her mother, the woman who'd taught her that strength came in soft forms, that surviving was its own kind of victory. They talked about Evelyn and Raphael and the way loss shaped people. They talked about fear and hope and the courage it took to try again after life knocked you down. And through it all, Sophia provided a soundtrack of narration as she played, her innocent chatter a reminder that life continued, that joy existed, that darkness wasn't permanent. I'm glad you stayed, Alexander said suddenly, during a comfortable silence. I know I fought it, but I'm glad you didn't listen to me. Me too, Maria admitted. Though there were moments I questioned my sanity. Only moments?
Okay, days.
Possibly weeks. She smiled. But here we are. Christmas morning. Still standing. Actually more than standing, we're eating pancakes and being something like happy. I'd call that a win. A definite win, Alexander agreed. He looked at the tree, the presents, the child playing contentedly on the floor, and his expression grew serious. Maria, I want to ask you something, and I want you to know you can say no. There's no pressure, no obligation. Okay, she said warily.
Stay.
Not just today. Stay here in the house as more than an employee. I don't know what to call it. Partners, maybe? Co-inhabitants? I'm not suggesting anything inappropriate, he added quickly. You'd have your own space, your privacy, everything. But this house is too big for one person, and after last night, after this morning, I don't want to go back to the emptiness. I want this. Conversation and pancakes, and someone noticing if I'm okay. Someone to notice back. Maria's heart hammered against her ribs. Alexander, that's a huge ask. What would people think? What would it look like? Honestly, I don't care what people think. I've spent my whole life caring what people thought, building a life that looked perfect from the outside while being hollow inside. I'm done with that. He turned to face her fully. I'm not asking for anything except companionship, friendship, a family, like you said, the chosen kind, the one we build. If that's something you want to. Maria looked at Sophia, at this man who'd been a stranger 12 hours ago and now felt like something more, at the Christmas tree that represented hope and new beginnings. She thought about the tiny room they occupied, about the uncertainty of her position, about the risk of accepting and the risk of refusing. Can I think about it? She asked finally. This is big, and I need to make sure I'm making the right choice for Sophia, not just for me. Of course, Alexander said immediately. Take all the time you need. The offer stands regardless. I just want you to know that there's a place for you here if you want it. Both of you. Sophia chose that moment to wander over, dragging a doll almost as big as she was. Mr. Alexander, can you play dollhouse with me? I need someone to be the daddy doll because the family needs a daddy. The words hung in the air, innocent and loaded with meaning. Alexander met Maria's eyes over Sophia's head, and she saw her own thoughts reflected there, the weight of what this could mean, the possibility and terror of it. I'd love to, Alexander said softly, sliding off the couch to sit cross-legged on the floor. But I've never played before. You'll have to teach me. That's okay, Sophia said generously. Everyone has to learn sometime. First, the daddy doll has to come home from work and give everyone hugs. Maria watched them play, her daughter instructing this billionaire in the complex politics of dollhouse dynamics, and felt something settle in her chest. Not certainty, she wasn't ready for that yet. But possibility. The sense that maybe, just maybe, they were all exactly where they needed to be. Outside, snow began to fall in earnest, blanketing the estate in white. Inside, in a living room that had been dead just hours before, 3 people who'd been alone learned how to be family. And if it was improvisation, well, sometimes the best things in life were unscripted. 3 days after Christmas, Maria stood at the window of the small bedroom she shared with Sophia, watching the winter sun turn the snow-covered grounds into something from a fairy tale. Behind her, Sophia napped, exhausted from another morning of playing dollhouse with Alexander, who'd proven to be surprisingly committed to his role as daddy doll. The past 72 hours had been surreal. Alexander had been present in a way Maria never would have predicted, joining them for meals, playing with Sophia, engaging in conversations that stretched late into the night after Sophia fell asleep. He'd even helped with laundry yesterday, standing beside Maria at the folding table, asking her to teach him how to properly fold fitted sheets. "I've been wealthy my entire adult life," he'd said, staring at the rumpled fabric with comic bewilderment. "I've literally never done this." "It's actually impossible," Maria had told him. "The fitted sheet will never be perfectly folded. That's just physics." "Are you telling me I've been paying people to do an impossible task?" Welcome to the mystery of household management. They'd laughed together, and Maria had felt the last of her employer-employee discomfort dissolving. Whatever they were becoming, it wasn't that anymore. But his offer kept circling in her mind.
Stay.
Not as a maid, but as, what? A friend? A companion? The mother figure Sophia was clearly trying to cast him opposite to. The implications were enormous, the risks significant. She was a divorced single mother with no safety net. He was a grieving billionaire who might wake up tomorrow, and remember, she was just the help. A soft knock on the doorframe made her turn. Alexander stood there, hands in his pockets, looking uncertain, an expression she was learning was far more common than his boardroom confidence. "Can we talk?" he asked. "I mean, if you're busy." "No, come in." She gestured to the small seating area, a worn armchair and footstool that had probably been expensive once, but now bore the marks of time and Sophia's various art projects. "Sophia's asleep. I have time." Alexander sat carefully in the armchair while Maria took the footstool, and for a moment they just looked at each other. The late afternoon light caught in his hair, highlighting strands of silver she hadn't noticed before. He looked better than he had on Christmas Eve, less gaunt, more present, but there was still sadness in his eyes. The kind of sadness that would probably live there forever, just integrated into who he was now. "I've been thinking about what I asked you," he began. "And I realized I didn't do it right. I made an impulsive offer without really explaining what I meant or what I was asking for. So, I wanted to try again, with more thought this time." "Okay," Maria said carefully. "First, I want to acknowledge the power imbalance here. I'm your employer, I'm wealthy, I own this house. That creates an inherent inequality that makes any proposal I make suspect. If you decide you don't want to stay, there will be no repercussions. I'll give you 6 months' salary, a real 6 months this time, that you'll actually take, and excellent references. Your job is secure regardless of what you choose." Maria nodded, appreciating the clarity even as her stomach knotted with anxiety. "Second," Alexander continued, "I want to be clear about what I'm offering. I'm not asking you to be my maid anymore. I'm asking if you and Sophia would consider living here as residents, not employees. You'd have the entire East Wing. There are 4 bedrooms there, a sitting room, your own kitchen if you want it. Sophia could have a proper playroom. You could redecorate however you like. I'd pay you, not as a maid, but as, I don't know, a household manager? Someone who helps keep the place running? But the money would be a salary for what amounts to half-time work, not full-time servitude." "Alexander." "Let me finish," he said gently.
Please.
I've been rehearsing this. She smiled despite her nerves. Okay. Finish. Third, and most importantly, I'm asking if we can be family. Not in a romantic sense. I'm not ready for that. Might never be ready for that. And I never want you to feel pressured in that direction. But family in the way you described. The chosen kind. The kind where people show up for each other. Where Sophia has someone male in her life who can throw her in the air and attend tea parties and be there for the big moments. Where I have people who remind me to eat and laugh and be human. Where you have support, security, and aren't doing this alone anymore. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. I know it's unconventional. I know people might gossip or make assumptions. But I've spent my whole life doing what looked right to other people, and it left me hollow. I want to do what actually is right. And this, having you both here, being part of something bigger than my grief, this feels right. More right than anything has in months. Maria felt tears building, but blinked them back. Can I be honest? Really honest, even if it's hard to hear? Please. I'm scared, she admitted. You're offering me something incredible, security, a home, family. It's everything I've wanted for Sophia. Everything I've been struggling to provide on my own. But I'm terrified of what happens when you heal more, when the grief isn't so raw. What if you wake up in 6 months and realize you don't need us anymore? That we were just a crutch you used to get through the worst of it? That's a fair fear, Alexander said quietly. And I'm scared of Sophia getting attached. She already calls you Mr. Alexander, like you're special, like you matter. What if this doesn't work? What if I'm making a terrible decision and she's the one who pays for it? Also fair. And selfishly, personally, I'm scared of getting attached too. Of believing this is real and permanent, and then losing it. I've already had one man who made me feel safe turn out to be anything but. How do I trust that you won't hurt you like he did? Alexander's voice was sharp. Maria, I would never. You wouldn't hit me, I know that, she said quickly. But there are other ways to hurt people. Neglect. Abandonment. Realizing they're not what you actually wanted. I'm not comparing you to Raphael, but I am saying that trust is hard for me. Really hard. And you're asking me to take a massive leap of faith. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, and Maria watched emotions play across his face. Understanding, frustration, determination. Finally, he stood and moved to sit on the floor in front of her, so she was looking down at him, the power dynamic physically reversed. You're right to be scared, he said. Everything you're saying is valid. I can't promise I won't hurt you, not because I want to, but because I'm human and flawed and still figuring out how to be alive again. I can't promise this will work perfectly, or that there won't be hard days. I can't even promise I'll always make the right choices. He reached up, stopping just short of taking her hand, letting her choose whether to close the distance. She did, slowly, her smaller hand settling into his. But I can promise intention, he said. I promise I'm not asking this lightly, or because I'm lonely and you're convenient. I'm asking because in 3 days, you and Sophia have reminded me that life can be beautiful even after it's been broken. That family isn't about blood, it's about choice and commitment and showing up. I promise that if you stay, I will show up. Every day. For pancakes and dollhouse games and tough conversations and all of it. What about when you date again? Maria asked bluntly. Because you will, eventually. What happens when there's a woman in your life who doesn't understand why you have a single mother and her daughter living in your house? Alexander actually laughed. Then she's not the right woman. Maria, anyone I'd ever seriously consider building something with would have to understand that you and Sophia are part of my life. Non-negotiable. Just like, if you eventually date, if you find someone who makes you happy, I'd never expect you to leave. We'd figure it out. That's what family does. You make it sound simple. It is simple. Not easy. There's a difference, but simple. We choose each other. We commit to making this work. We communicate when things are hard. We build something new that doesn't erase our pasts but creates space for our futures. Maria looked down at their joined hands. His was larger, marked with calluses from recent physical work around the house. He'd been chopping wood for the fireplace, learning how to do things for himself. Hers was rough from years of cleaning, smaller but strong. Two different hands, different histories holding on to each other. I want to say yes, she whispered. I want this so much it scares me. Then say yes. We'll figure out the scary parts together. What if I'm making a mistake? What if you're not? Alexander countered gently. What if this is exactly where you're supposed to be? Where Sophia's supposed to be? What if the whole terrible journey that brought us both here, my loss, your escape from Raphael, all of it, what if it was leading to this? To us becoming family? That's a very romantic way of looking at trauma, Maria said, but she was smiling through tears now. I prefer to think of it as finding meaning in the meaningless, making something good from something bad. Behind them, Sophia stirred, making the small sounds that meant she'd be awake soon. Maria looked at Alexander's face, open and hopeful and scared, just as scared as she was, she realized. They were both taking a leap, both risking something precious, both choosing to believe in possibility despite every reason they had to play it safe. Okay, she said finally.
Yes.
We'll stay. We'll try this. But, Alexander, you have to promise me something. Anything. If it's not working, if you need us to leave, you tell me. Directly. No passive aggression. No creating situations that make us uncomfortable enough to leave on our own. You be honest with me, and I'll be honest with you. Can you promise that? I promise, he said solemnly. Communication, honesty, respect. Those are the foundations. And you have to let me pay rent.
Something.
I can't live here for free. Absolutely not. You'll be working. Part-time, you said. So part-time salary, and I pay something toward housing. A token amount, Alexander countered. Enough that you feel like you're contributing, but not enough to be a burden. Say, a few hundred a month. That's not even. Take it or leave it. Those are my terms. Maria laughed, the sound watery but real. You're impossible. I'm learning to negotiate with people who aren't motivated purely by profit. It's a new skill. Sophia sat up in bed, rubbing her eyes, her hair standing up in directions that defied physics. Mama? Why are you crying? Are you sad? No, baby, Maria said, pulling her daughter into her lap. I'm happy. Mr. Alexander asked us to stay here, to be part of his family. Would you like that? Sophia's eyes went wide. Like, forever stay? Not just working stay? Like making this our home, Alexander said. You could have a big bedroom and a playroom, and we'd be together. I'd be, well, not your daddy, but maybe like an uncle? Or a friend. Whatever feels right to you. Sophia looked between them, her 3-year-old brain processing this information. Then, with the clarity children sometimes possess, she said, like a family. Like in my dollhouse. Mama and Sophia and Mr. Alexander. Exactly like that, Alexander confirmed. Okay. Sophia's agreement was instant and enthusiastic. Can I decorate my room with butterflies? You can decorate it with anything you want, Alexander said. Butterflies, rainbows, dinosaurs, whatever makes you happy. Butterflies, Sophia decided firmly. And maybe some dragons. Dragons are cool. Dragons are very cool, Alexander agreed seriously. We'll get dragon bedsheets. As Sophia chattered about the relative merits of different colored dragons, Maria met Alexander's eyes over her daughter's head. He was smiling, not the sad, broken smile of Christmas Eve, but something warmer, more genuine. There was still grief there, would always be grief there. But there was also hope. They were a strange family, she thought. Assembled from broken pieces, built on loss and survival, and the courage to try again. A billionaire who'd forgotten how to live, a woman who'd learned to survive, and a little girl who still believed in magic. It shouldn't work. By any conventional measure, it was absurd. But sometimes the best things in life were a little absurd. Thank you, she mouthed silently to Alexander. Thank you, he mouthed back. And in the fading afternoon light, with Sophia planning a butterfly dragon paradise and snow falling softly outside, 3 people who'd been alone began the work of building something together. A family. Not perfect, not conventional, but real. And sometimes real was enough. Maria woke to the sound of laughter drifting through her open bedroom window. For a moment, still caught in the fog of sleep, she forgot where she was. Then consciousness settled, bringing with it the familiar warmth of her new reality. Home. She was home. Rolling out of bed, she padded to the window and looked down at the garden below. June's sunlight poured over the estate's grounds, everything green and alive and thriving. And there, in the middle of what had once been a severely manicured lawn and was now considerably more chaotic, Alexander and Sophia were building something with wooden planks and an alarming number of tools. "No, Mr. Alexander, that piece goes on the bottom." Sophia's voice carried clearly, bossy and confident in the way only a nearly 4-year-old could be. "Otherwise the whole castle will fall down." "My apologies, Architect Sophia," Alexander replied with exaggerated formality. "I shall defer to your superior expertise in castle construction." "That's better. Also, we need more glitter." "We always need more glitter, according to you. Glitter makes everything better. That's just science." Maria smiled, watching them. 6 months. Half a year since that Christmas Eve, when a little girl's kindness and a broken man's vulnerability had started all of this. Sometimes it felt like a lifetime ago. Other times, like yesterday. The transition hadn't been seamless. Those first few weeks, they'd all tiptoed around each other, learning the dance of cohabitation, figuring out boundaries and rhythms. Alexander had insisted on family dinners, but struggled to show up on time. Maria had maintained formal distance until he'd literally asked her to please just treat him like a person, not an employer. Sophia had adapted with the flexibility of childhood, but even she'd had moments of confusion about who Alexander was and what he meant to them. They'd had their first real fight in February, when Alexander had bought Sophia an elaborate playground set without consulting Maria. She'd been furious, not at the gift, but at being excluded from the decision, at feeling like her role as parent was being undermined. They'd argued, both of them revealing deeper fears and insecurities, and eventually found their way to understanding. Now they made major decisions together, a parenting team, even if they weren't partners in the traditional sense. "You're missing the show." Maria turned to find Alexander's housekeeper. Their housekeeper, she corrected herself, still getting used to the plural possessive, standing in the doorway with a coffee cup. "Thanks, Helen." She accepted the coffee gratefully. Alexander had hired Helen in March, when it became clear that Maria managing the household alone while also trying to be part of the family wasn't sustainable. Helen was 60, unflappable, and treated the whole unconventional arrangement with complete equanimity. "He's been up since 6, Helen said, moving to stand beside Maria at the window. "Started building that castle the moment the hardware store opened. Said something about promises and dragons. He told Sophia 2 weeks ago he'd build her a castle if she was brave at the dentist. I thought he meant a toy castle." "Mr. Alexander doesn't do anything halfway," Helen observed dryly. "You should see the architectural sketches in his study. The man designed a structurally sound fortress for a 3-year-old. Maria laughed, shaking her head. "He's ridiculous." "He's happy," Helen corrected. "First time since I started, he actually seems happy. That's your doing, you know." "It's mutual," Maria said softly. It was true. The Alexander who laughed with Sophia over breakfast, who insisted on family game nights even though he was terrible at board games, who'd learned to braid hair through YouTube tutorials, this man bore little resemblance to the hollow figure from Christmas. Grief was still part of him. He kept a picture of Evelyn on his desk, talked about her naturally, included her memory in their lives. But grief no longer defined him. And Maria, she'd changed too. The woman who'd been so afraid to trust, who'd held herself carefully separate, had softened. Let down walls. Let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved good things. Deserved a home, a family, a partner in parenting if not in romance. Though about that, she pushed the thought away. They'd established clear boundaries. Alexander had been true to his word. Nothing romantic, nothing inappropriate, just family. If her heart sometimes whispered other possibilities, if she noticed the way his hands moved when he talked or how his whole face changed when he smiled, well, That was her problem to manage. Mama. Sophia's voice rang out. Come see. Mr. Alexander is gonna put a flag on top. Coming. Maria called back. She drained her coffee, threw on shorts and a t-shirt, and headed downstairs. The castle, she discovered upon closer inspection, was actually impressive. For walls about 4 feet high, complete with battlements, and a working drawbridge. Alexander had assembled it with a focused intensity he probably once reserved for business deals, while Sophia directed operations with the confidence of a general. What do you think? Alexander asked as Maria approached. He had sawdust in his hair and a smudge of something on his cheek, and looked more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. 6 months of actual meals and regular sleep and reasons to smile had filled out his frame, softened the harsh angles grief had carved into him. I think you're both insane, Maria said. And I love it. Sophia, this is incredible. It's my castle, Sophia announced. But Mr. Alexander can visit if he asks nicely. I shall always ask nicely, Your Majesty, Alexander said solemnly. Then, to Maria, we're going to paint it this afternoon. Sophia's chosen purple with pink trim. Naturally. And we need to install the lighting system. There's a lighting system? Of course there's a lighting system. What's a castle without dramatic illumination? He grinned at her expression. I may have gotten carried away. You think? They spent the afternoon painting, all 3 of them, because Sophia insisted Mama had to help too. It was messy and chaotic and perfect. Sophia got more paint on herself than the castle. Alexander discovered he was terrible at staying inside the lines, and Maria laughed so hard at one point she nearly fell off the stepladder. As evening approached and Sophia's energy finally began to flag, they moved inside for dinner. This was the routine they'd established. Family dinner every night unless absolutely unavoidable. Everyone contributing. Tonight, Maria made pasta while Alexander handled the salad, and Sophia set the table, arranging napkins with intense concentration. Mr. Alexander, Sophia said suddenly, pausing in her napkin arrangement. Are you happy now? The question hung in the air. Maria saw Alexander freeze, saw emotion flicker across his face. Surprise, consideration, something deeper. Yes, he said finally, kneeling down to Sophia's level. I'm happy now. Are you? Super happy, Sophia confirmed. Happier than before? Than before when? Before you were sad. Before we came here to live. Oh, Sophia. Alexander pulled her into a hug, and Maria saw his shoulders shake slightly. Yes, sweetheart. Happier than I've been in a long time. Good, Sophia said, patting his back consolingly. I want you to be happy. You're family now. After dinner, after Sophia's bath and story time and final 8 requests for water / another story / one more hug, after she'd finally succumbed to sleep in her butterfly and dragon bedroom, Maria found Alexander on the back terrace. He stood at the railing, looking out over the grounds, the castle a purple and pink beacon in the gathering dusk. Hey, she said softly, coming to stand beside him. You okay? Yeah. He smiled at her. Just thinking about how different everything is. How different I am. Different how? 6 months ago, I wanted to disappear. Couldn't see the point of continuing. The world felt gray and empty, and I was just going through motions, waiting for, I don't know, permission to stop. And now, he gestured at the castle, the house, everything. Now I built a castle. I learned to braid hair. I know all the words to Sophia's favorite songs even though they're objectively terrible. I care about things again. Small things, everyday things, things that matter. You were always capable of that, Maria said. You just forgot for a while. Maybe. He turned to face her fully. But you reminded me. Both of you. You gave me a reason to remember how to be human. We needed each other, Maria said. That's how family works. Maria, I need to tell you something. Her heart kicked hard against her ribs. Okay. I've been thinking a lot about boundaries lately. About the ones we established. And I think maybe some of them should change. At her sharp inhale, He held up a hand. Not in a way that makes you uncomfortable, but in a way that's honest about what's actually happening here. Alexander. I'm falling in love with you, he said simply. No, that's not right. I've already fallen. Probably started that first night when you refused to leave me alone with my grief. Definitely by the time you yelled at me about the playground set. Completely and utterly by yesterday, when you stayed up until 2 in the morning helping me debug code for a work project while eating ice cream straight from the carton. Maria couldn't breathe. You said you weren't ready for her. I know what I said. And 6 months ago, it was true. I wasn't ready. I needed time to grieve, to heal, to figure out who I was without Evelyn. But, Maria, I've learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. Evelyn is part of me, always will be. But that doesn't mean my heart stopped having room for other people. For new love. I'm your employee, Maria said weakly. You haven't been my employee for months. You're my co-parent, my best friend, the person I want to talk to about everything. The one who makes me laugh and calls me out when I'm being ridiculous and makes the house feel like a home. The power dynamic is something we'd have to navigate carefully. I know that. I'm not asking for an answer right now, tonight. I'm just asking you to think about it, to consider whether maybe you feel something too, or if I'm alone in this. Maria stared at him, her mind racing. She thought about the way her heart lifted when she heard his footsteps in the morning. The way she found excuses to be near him, to brush past him in the kitchen, to sit close during movie nights. The way she dreamed about him sometimes, dreams that woke her with longing and guilt in equal measure. You're not alone in it, she whispered. I've been trying so hard not to feel anything, to keep boundaries, to protect myself and Sophia. But Alexander, you're everything I didn't know I was looking for. Patient and kind and silly with Sophia and serious with me, and you've created this space where we can just be ourselves and... She didn't get to finish because he was kissing her. Gentle, tentative, his hands cupping her face like she was precious. It was nothing like Raphael's kisses had been. Those had been claiming, possessive, taking. This was asking, offering, inviting her to meet him halfway. When they broke apart, both breathless, Alexander pressed his forehead to hers. I love you, he said again. You and Sophia both. My family. If you'll have me, not just as a friend, but as whatever we can be together. Yes, Maria breathed. Yes, I'll have you. We'll have you. But slowly, okay? For Sophia's sake, we take this slowly. As slow as you need, he promised. I'm not going anywhere. They stood there in the twilight, holding each other, and Maria felt something shift in her chest. The last piece of armor she'd been carrying fell away. She was safe. They were safe. This strange, unconventional family they'd built from broken pieces was real and solid, and I knew it. They sprang apart to find Sophia standing in the doorway in her pajamas, practically vibrating with excitement. Sophia, you're supposed to be asleep, Maria managed. But I wasn't. And I came to find you, and I saw. You were kissing. Like in Mama's movies. Sophia bounced on her toes. Does this mean Mr. Alexander is going to be my daddy for real now? Alexander and Maria exchanged glances, panic, amusement, and love mixed together. How about we talk about it in the morning? Alexander suggested. When you're supposed to be awake? But... Bed, Mija, Maria said firmly.
Now.
As they tucked Sophia back in, together, standing side by side, the little girl grabbed both their hands. I love you both, she announced. You're the best family ever. Even better than the dollhouse family, because you're real. We love you too, Maria said, her voice thick with emotion. So much, Alexander added. More than all the dragons and butterflies in the world. That's a lot, Sophia said seriously. Then she yawned. Okay, I'll sleep now. But tomorrow we need to talk about if I get to call you Daddy or Papa or Dad or something else. Tomorrow, Alexander promised. Sleep now. Back in the hallway, Maria leaned against the wall and started to laugh. Well, so much for going slow. She's her mother's daughter, Alexander said. perceptive and impossible to keep secrets from. Are you okay with this? With what she said about being her father? Am I, Maria? I'd be honored. If that's what you both want, if you're comfortable with it, I can't think of anything I'd want more. Maria pulled him close, breathing in the scent of him, wood and paint and home. I think Evelyn would like you being happy again, being part of a family again. I think so too, Alexander said softly. She'd have loved you, you know. And Sophia. She always wanted kids. We were planning to start trying before his voice caught, but he pushed through. She'd be glad I didn't stay alone. That I found this. Found us, Maria corrected. Or we found each other. Or Sophia found us both and decided we needed to be together. However it happened, I'm grateful for it. For all of it. Even the pain that led here because it gave me you. They stood in the hallway outside Sophia's room, holding each other as the house settled into night around them. Somewhere in his office, Evelyn's picture smiled from its frame. In Sophia's room, a little girl who'd known too little stability finally slept in perfect security. And in the garden, a purple and pink castle stood as testament to the magic that happened when broken people chose to heal together. Maria thought about that Christmas Eve 6 months ago, about a little girl who'd offered to share her mother with a crying stranger, about soup and pancakes and the courage it took to stay when leaving would have been easier, about grief and survival, and the families we built from whatever pieces we had. Don't cry, sir, Sophia had said. You can borrow my mom. And in borrowing, in staying, in choosing each other day after day, they'd built something none of them could have imagined. Not a fairy tale, because fairy tales were simple and this was complex and messy and real. But perhaps something better. A family. Chosen, earned, built with intention and love. And as Maria stood in Alexander's arms in the house that had once been a mausoleum and was now a home, she thought that maybe, just maybe, this was what happily ever after actually looked like. Not perfect. Not without scars or memories or complications. But real.
And warm.
And full of love. And sometimes, that was the best kind of magic there was.